I went to see the movie The Martian yesterday, and I thought I'd do a quick review. So first of all, I would say that it's a good science fiction film. If you just want to pop along, kick back, put your feet on the skull of the person sitting in front of you, bucket of popcorn, refreshing beverage of your choice, it's a good science fiction film. You'll enjoy it. So it's worth going to see. That said, technically full of holes, and I'll just go through what I thought of it. So spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. If you don't want to know what happens, press stop now. Right, well, the first thing I thought was a little odd was they went for a 31-day mission. Yet they had 2 huge rovers, and they had, pads and all this sort of stuff, and I thought that's a lot of stuff to take for a 31-day stay. I know it makes sense, it's a very long way. I know it makes sense to duplicate the systems, but to have 2 huge rovers, yeah, I'm not so sure. Of course, there's the energy in the wind. There wouldn't be enough energy in the wind to actually knock over structures like that. And after the storm goes through and he's left on his own, and he starts sorting himself out, what he does is he just seems to have water and power. That's no problem. We just have to assume that all that's available from the few solar panels he's got propped up outside. Just all the electricity works, and there's water. He's got no real problem there. He uses his own human waste as fertiliser to grow some spuds. So he gets some Martian regolith, puts some plastic sheet down, Martian regolith, puts the spuds in with his human waste. He goes and retrieves, because remember, it's not a colony, it's just a visiting mission, so that's bagged rather than recycled. And he gets his human waste and he uses that as manure to grow the spuds. Okay. We'll assume he's getting enough power from his solar panels to run his life support system. That's completely glazed over. He then decides he's going to go and retrieve. Well, he's going to go to another spacecraft, I think. That's right. He's trying to sort out how to extend the range of the rover for 2 reasons. One is to get to another spacecraft so he can communicate with Earth, because the comm system has been destroyed. And the other is to get to the ascent vehicle for the next mission, which he knows will be in place, but it's 3,000 kilometres away. He's got a range of 36 kilometres with his rover. So he's out, and they nobbled a scene from Apollo 13, where he's in the rover, he's got all the systems turned off and he's freezing. And I thought, yeah, I know where you got that from. And actually they nobbled a couple of other things from Apollo 13 as well. One was the phrase, "You are a steely-eyed missile man," and they also did the radio blackout thing, which was pretty much a rip-off of the movie Apollo 13. So there was a few things there that, yeah, okay, if you hadn't seen Apollo 13 you wouldn't notice it, but I thought, yeah, I don't know how common steely-eyed missile man that as a phrase is. It may be very common in NASA, I don't know. Okay, so he's trying to extend the range of the rover. Now he finds the other rover, which has been damaged, and he pulls the battery out of that. And then he decides that he's going to use the radiothermic generator that was used for powering the spacecraft. He said the radiothermic generator was useful for powering a spacecraft, not terribly useful for powering a pad, I think he said. Well, he's right about that. Excuse me. He then goes and digs up the radiothermic generator, and he says, now this has been buried. Because it's radioactive, this has been buried because it's radioactive. And going very slow along, there's someone doing 40 kilometres an hour in front of me, holding everybody up. Now this has been buried, he tells us, because it's radioactive. So he goes and digs it up. and he digs this radiothermic generator out of the ground, this RTG, digs it out of the ground. There's no cables connected to it, so they buried it in the ground and just left it. It wasn't actually doing anything. He didn't have to disconnect any cables from it. So, and then he puts it in the cab of the rover to keep him warm, because radiothermic generators produce electricity from heat, from decaying nuclear material. So, plutonium-238. So, he's just told us it's radioactive. Next thing, it's sitting in the cab of the rover with him to keep him warm. The heat from this thing's keeping him warm. But it doesn't occur to him to use the electricity that the radiothermic generator is producing, because when they're producing heat, they're producing electricity. It's simple as that. That's why they use them on space missions. It doesn't occur to for him to use that electrical energy from the radiothermic generator to charge the spare battery. So when he's out in the rover, instead of having he drives for 36 kilometres and then puts the other charged battery in, because it's being charged from the radiothermic generator, he drives to the next, he just uses the radiothermic generator to keep the cabin warm and uses solar panels to charge the battery. So he stops, drives 36 kilometres, stops for 13 hours, puts the solar panels out to charge the battery up. That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? He might just as well have one battery. I suppose you'd get a 36 kilometre head start with the first battery charge, wouldn't you? So you put the battery in, you run 36 kilometres, you take that one out, then you put the other battery in, go another 36 kilometres, then you have to start your charging cycle. To do that for 3,200 kilometres. Anyway, over and the Martian surface. The Martian surface is shown as being all lovely and smooth red dust. Pictures we see from Curiosity and other Martian probes is that the surface is littered with small rocks that would rip the tyres on the rover to pieces. He has another explosion in the hab. Oh, there's the first explosion in the hab where he's trying to make water from hydrazine from rocket fuel. That's funny. I did laugh. Just like a cartoon, he had an explosion and he's doing his video log and he's sitting there talking to the computer and there's steam or smoke wisping off him. I thought that was really quite fun. Anyway, there's a second explosion in the hab. The film started to get slow, and literally just as I looked at my watch, I looked down at my watch, boom, there's an explosion and some action started. So I don't know what caused that explosion, but basically blew the side off the module off the side of his hab, and speed up a bit here. Blew the module off the side of his hab, and he lost all his crops. They all sort of flash frozen in the cold temperature as the atmosphere was allowed into the pushed its way into the hab. Now, following me, they're going to be disappointed. He decides to seal the hab with plastic sheeting. So if you can imagine a hole, it's a round hole, it's a nice neat round hole. Fortunately for him, everything he seems to have seems to fit whatever he's got. He's got this plastic sheeting and he sticks with duct tape over this 2 metre diameter circular hole that's open to the outside to seal the hab. Then he repressurises it. Again, we take it for granted that the life support system is making all the air and water he needs. You just see the plastic pop out as the hab pressurises. A little later there's a storm, violent storm, there's all this stuff again, wouldn't be enough energy in the wind, but all this stuff is being blown around, plastic's blowing in and out. But you would think that he would have thought, okay, I'll put something over that circular portal, because if you've got plastic sealing it, okay, you might not be able to make an airtight seal with something robust. So if anything hits it, it's going to bounce off, But once you've sealed it with the plastic and your duct tape, and remember, if you do go to Mars, take your duct tape and take a Leatherman tool as well. then you would put something in front of that to protect the plastic so that anything getting blown around isn't going to puncture it. Well, that's not what happens, but it didn't cross my mind. So, you know, technically there's a lot of holes in this movie. A lot of holes. The way he gets back to the... it gets fluffy towards the end, where the guy at NASA, the Chinese guy at NASA's uncle, is in the Chinese Space Agency, and they agreed to send up a resupply ship after the American one fails. The supply ships are sent up because the Ares 3, I think it is, it's on its way back from Mars to Earth. The crew have been told halfway back that Watney's still alive, and they decide they're going to ignore NASA and go back and get him. Then there's a mad rush at NASA to get a supply ship set up so that they can set up a module to lock onto the Ares 3, and so they've got enough supplies and all this sort of stuff. And you've got the particularly, you know, the brusque NASA director says, "Oh yeah, you know," they said, we're never going to make it. You know, we've got 10 days worth of inspections to do." And he said, "Forget the inspections. You know, that's on me." And you know, as soon as he said that, what's going to happen to that rocket? So that was completely predictable. We're all standing around, they cheer when it takes off, and I can understand them cheering Apollo 13 back then. This was a repetition of the Apollo 13 scene when it came back, because obviously they don't cheer when the thing launches. You expect it to work. But it's a big cheer, you know, it goes up, and I thought, yeah, it's going to explode. And of course, it explodes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to see the cutaway to the Chinese Space Agency. Of course, the Chinese Space Agency sends up a module, and they go back to Mars and they get him. He bolts all the bits from his ascent vehicle. It's got to be as light as possible because the speed's not right. The guys back at NASA have said they've run all the numbers. If they've run all the numbers, it shouldn't really have been a surprise to them. They then have to remove all this other stuff to reduce the weight of the ascent vehicle, and then to take the windows out of it and cover it in a tarp. That's pretty ridiculous as well. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One is, well, you don't really need the tarp. You don't need the tarp, because if any of you have ever driven a car without a windscreen in it, you know that the vehicle, if you're pushing a vehicle through air, then the thing will fill with air, and that will stop any more air coming in. So it's like you've got an invisible windscreen. They didn't need to put the tarp on it. And the other thing is that because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, you probably wouldn't have needed any kind of tarp in the first place. So anyway, he gets back, and the last scene is a professor, and he's talking to the new astronaut recruits, telling him his story and getting him into it. So that's what happens in the movie The Martian. Technically, full of holes, absolute rubbish in most places. But as a science fiction film to go and enjoy without analysis, great stuff. Go and see it. You know, I don't feel fleeced at all. So there you go. That's my 2 bobs worth on The Martian. And maybe I'll catch you again.